It didn't matter how many times he saw it. Xillian always looked on in awe whenever a human Titan-class ship was at station. He stared unashamed out of the viewport as his orbital shuttle approached Station Cariona. Humans referred to it as a Trident station, resembling the object in question. Being a gateway station between the core and outer worlds, she was a massive structure, designed to accommodate a large number and variety of people and ships. Xillian knew from experience it could take a third of a cycle to walk from the bridge to the far end of the fingers. Titan-class ships more than earned their name, though, as TS Elyria was nearly the length of Station Cariona's main structure. She didn't land at the station as much as she hovered in arm's reach, and reserved several landing pads for use by a constant stream of shuttles. Xillian gazed upon her viewing copula, a glass superstructure on the belly, large enough to rival megacity stadiums. He wondered what it was like aboard one of those ships. What secrets the humans held in there. Despite the constant movement of people and cargo, and even despite being a civilian ship, human colony ships were a mystery to the galaxy, shrouded in secrets. As the resident xenothology expert, Xillian knew much about the many species that frequented the station he called home. Humans were regarded across the galaxy as settlers and colonizers. Anywhere a human was found was a place a human could call home, and humans loved feeling at home. They were so good at making themselves at home, they became famed as the greatest colony planet founders. Second place couldn't even come close to their prowess. Xillian reflected on this, considering the impossibilities of planet colonization. It wasn't something a person or government could just decide to do. A truly monumental amount of time, people, resources, and more were required to start a colony, and even then, it was only the beginning. The colony planet would be a leech on the host civilization for an average lifetime before it became fully autonomous. Fledgling civilizations died innumerous times over their colonies. Space was littered with failed civilizations that spread themselves too thin between two worlds and collapsed as a result. Humans did not care for these impossibilities, however, because their colony worlds were established and autonomous in a quarter lifetime with seemingly none of the additional burden that came with a colony world. Xillian was captivated by them and dreamt of unlocking their secrets. Just one facet of the humans' many apathies to the rules of the universe. The ship was also a marvel itself. Humans were perfectly good at miniaturization. Any spacefaring species had to be to shed the shackles of gravity and mass. But they were apathetic to these restraints as well, only abiding by them when convenient. Humans were equally skilled in scaling up as they were down, producing gargantuan creations. Creations like the TS Elyria. Giddiness began to bubble in his chest. Today he was realizing his dream, having been formally invited to tour the colony ship. Even greater was his permission to publish academic works using information gathered. If he was lucky, the door was even open for him to visit the colony on the planet Elyria later. Captain Andrea Carson was a woman he called a friend. She frequented Cariona on her journeys, and the two had spent many long days together. She was an ambitious woman, rapidly earning greater authority and recognition in her line of work. She frequently leaned on his expertise as a xenothologist to keep her ships and crews working smoothly. She cared not for the species of her crews, only their capabilities, and she would restructure half her ship to accommodate everyone she needed on her crew. Xillian often was left scratching his head at her unorthodox decisions, but whenever he asked her why she bothered facing down difficult tasks, she would always ask back, why not? Why not? Was also her response when Xillian asked her to tour her colony ship when he learned of her current endeavor. His head spun, thinking about all the favors and strings she had to pull to get him on board, but he had never seen her come up short before, and she came through again this time, too. Just another facet of humanity's apathy to the rules of the galaxy. Perspective is a difficult thing to keep hold of in the vastness of space, so Xillian felt as though time dragged to a halt while Station Cariona slowly filled more of his viewport. Eventually, mercifully, they arrived. The shuttle landed with a gentle thump as it settled on its suspension, and Xillian made his way to the exit as fast as he could nonchalantly manage. Just as he anticipated, Andrea was waiting for his arrival, and the two embraced as they met. They climbed into a shuttle cart and chatted excitedly as they made their way down the length of the station. Andrea always had exciting stories to share, many of which provided interesting insight into the various species of the galaxy. For his part, Xillian had his fair share of gossip and drama to share that Andrea absolutely ate up. "I never imagined you being interested in a colony ship," Xillian remarked. Andrea laughed at that. "I'm not. But if I impress the organizers, then I'll get the sign-off to move up to the super freighters." Xillian paused. "You're joking," he accused. Andrea laughed, but she insisted she meant it. Xillian knew anything the humans prefixed with super was immediately something to be wary of. At a study level, humans fascinated Xillian. Their physical appearance and demeanor made them so easy to overlook. But physically, cognitively, or through any other lens one studied them, humans were more than capable of hitting well above their weight. When it came to scale, they were especially guilty of this. They were devout worshippers of the economy of scale and built shrines of all variety in its name. A super freighter was one such shrine. Titan-class ships are the largest that have ever visitation. Just how large are the super freighters? Andrea considered the question for a moment. She remarked that the smallest super freighter was maybe 4 or 5 times the size of the CS Elyria they were rapidly approaching. Xillian nearly fell out of the cart and had to catch himself. Andrea laughed, then laughed some more. "Though you might like that," she said. "My contract is for the voyage and first 180 cycles of the colony. A new captain will be elected after that, and I'll be off to start super training." Xillian tried to wrap his head around what he'd just learned, but the information refused to stick. He'd have to think about it later, though, because they'd arrived at the landing bays. Andrea drove the shuttle cart into landing bay RA5, and the two were swiftly ferried over to the CS Elyria. To call it an impressive vessel would be an understatement. Comfort, quality, equipment, utility, volume. There was no category the CS Elyria was lacking in. Colony ships were the pride of the human fleet, and Xillian could now fully appreciate why. As impressive as it was from the exterior, the interior was a step beyond. 3 cycles wouldn't be enough to fully explore and appreciate the ship, and they only had a half cycle at best. Xillian's heart ached at every stop. Andrea only gave the briefest tours of the various places and things due to their time constraints. The ship's cargo was enormous, easily half the vessel by volume. Machinery, prefabricated units and structures, layers and layers of storage containers, everything you might need to plant a large town on the surface of a planet. An impressive hydroponics lab was also on board, which was unexpected. It made sense thinking about it, but he'd never heard of it before in other species' colony ships. In general, but especially in the living quarters, Xillian noted just how lived-in the ship was. Across the ship was the subtle markings of personality, as he called it. Repetitive wear patterns, drawings and modifications on equipment, note chains, a general subtle disorder and sloppiness to everything. All signs of regular and sustained use. Despite being shiny and new, the humans had wasted no time in making themselves at home. They made several stops throughout the day, and Xillian took as many notes as he could, but the highlight of the tour was the command center. The bridge of the ship was elsewhere, but the brain of the colony lived in the command center. Once established, the ship was critical infrastructure to the colony, housing the vast majority of data and technology. Anything and everything digital passed through the command center. Rows and rows of computers, terminals, holotables and more were arranged stadium-style in ever-expanding rows, with the central command station at the heart of it all. Xillian had seen electronic warfare ships with less computing power, but the cherry on top was the location. The floor of the stadium was the enormous viewing cupola. Xillian could easily imagine the ship in stationary orbit, budding colony in full view of the crew as they worked to keep everyone on the planet below alive and prospering. Andrea beamed with pride, showing it off. having clearly saved the best for last. What a ship! Xillian breathed. Awe and wonder swirled around his brain as he stared down on the sea of stars below. Truly the ship was in a class of its own. Very rightfully was it the pride of the human fleet with all its impressive features. Yet, a strange thought occurred to him. Nothing he had seen was particularly revolutionary or innovative, and he considered if that was why it was such an unknown to the galaxy. Typically only settlers and cargo handlers would ever step on board, and for them it was nothing worth showing off. The ship as a whole and the accomplishments it represented were worth boasting about, sure, but the actual inner workings were wholly regular. This ship will be home to thousands of colonists for a long time, Andrea said. It has to be comfortable for those who will live here for a considerable portion of their lives. How do you do it? Xillian wondered aloud. Everywhere you go, humans are happy to make themselves at home. No matter how unfamiliar the location or isolated they are, they can and will make themselves familiar and connected. Andrea paused briefly in consideration. Home is where the heart is, Xillian. Some of our homes are out there in the great unknown, and some of our hearts are right here with the people and things around us.